This is Beyond the Blue Badge, brought to you by the Microsoft Alumni Network, where we dive into Microsoft alumni stories that inform and inspire.
Welcome to Beyond the Blue Badge. I'm Becky Monk, CMO at the Microsoft Alumni Network.
Hey, Becky, and I'm Larry Hryb. Today, we're diving into one of the most transformative eras in Microsoft's history, the company's embrace of the internet.
Right. There was a time when the modern internet wasn't a given. In the early 90s, it was still a curiosity for many. It's crazy to think about now, but it wasn't that long ago. And I mean, remember road trips? You actually had to have a paper map to figure out where you were going, or you couldn't book a plane ticket without going to a travel agency.
Yeah, it really has been transformative, Becky. I mean, kids today will never know the struggle of missing their favorite show because there was no streaming, no on demand, no DVR. I mean, there's no, you want to listen to the latest music, you can do it instantly on your phone. You have access to pretty much any piece of music ever made instantly. It wasn't that way back then. Same thing with video games. You had to go to a store, you had to buy a cartridge, and then maybe later on there was a disc. You inserted it and you played it, and that kind of was it. You really couldn't connect with your friends. It was the beginning of it. We were starting to see a little bit of LAN parties, but again, it was all LAN. L is in LAN is local. So we were all together in one room. So things have really come a long way in what media has done with the internet, of course, education, all parts of it. Right, Becky?
Right. And if you wanted to know something, you couldn't just, Bing. You had to go to the library to look something up or just not know. Hey, we survived though. We survived. And now we get to tell these stories like grizzled internet pioneers.
That's right. But inside Microsoft, a few true pioneers saw the Internet Tidal Wave coming and helped steer the company towards it.
That's right, Larry. And we'll hear from 5 alumni who were at the heart of that shift. Steven Sinofsky, John Ludwig, Jay Allard, Patty Stonesifer, and Mike Toutonghi. And each of them played a unique role in Microsoft's internet evolution, from strategy and product to platforms and culture.
We begin with Steven Sinofsky, who shares a vivid story from 1994. Stranded in a snowstorm in Cornell in upstate New York, he stumbled upon a student lab that opened his eyes to how the internet was already transforming communication and access.
It was a real aha moment for Sinofsky. After seeing how wired Cornell had become, he wrote a memo titled "Cornell is Wired." And that memo quickly made its way around Microsoft, and it helped spark what would become Microsoft's internet strategy.
And so I get this job and I have to just figure out what to do. But the big thing was, this is basically starting in late 1993, early 94, and Chicago, which became Windows 95, is under development. Well, in February of 1994, February always being an important month to visit Cornell, that's when I visited when I was in high school, I fly out to do my twice yearly recruiting trip. So I'm at Cornell, staying at the same hotel, go to the same Kimball B11 engineering, all the same stuff, except it starts to snow. And they're shutting the campus down, which they never really did. It was bad. And the school, it's just complete whiteout. You can't go anywhere. Even the truck that used to do French bread pizza is gone. Like it was just, the whole thing was shut down. So I walk over to the computer place I'd worked in as an undergrad in the computer science building, Upson, on the basement, Upson B4. And there's no one in it because no one can walk anywhere. And the guy looks up at me who's staffing it. And by then there were Next computers and Macintoshes. All the VT100s had mostly been taken out, the terminals to the mainframe at the airport. And I say I actually, out of my mouth come the same words that used to make me groan. Hey, I graduated here a few years ago. Just want to talk to you. And I see the guy's eyes roll. And I have no self-awareness about how ridiculous I would sound to myself. And I just proceed to ask him to tell me everything about it. And he starts taking me on a tour of the facility. And he starts showing me how students are using Macintoshes. And I'm blown away. They come into the room. They don't have to sign in like we used to. They just pop a disk in. They get this menu called Bear Access. The Cornell mascot's a bear. And they log in. with their Cornell ID. When I'm like, I was TGUJ at cornell.edu, like, and they get their names, and it's like crazy. They check their mail. There's mail from professors. There's mail from other students in labs, and then they pull the floppy out. They leave. They print things. They do, and there's this thing called the internet that they connect to. Now, I knew what the internet was. I'd been using it since I was in college. We used chat and FTP and all this stuff. I did internet with people at the University of Wisconsin to work on the synthesizer. But this was like with pictures and stuff. And I go back the next day and I'm watching the students pile in and do all this. It's mesmerizing. I'm trapped. There's nowhere to go. Like, I have nothing to do. I just spend all day and I'm randomly talking to students who clearly think I'm some freak. And I go back to the dorm and I bang out this giant memo describing everything I've seen called Cornell, and I call it cornell.doc or cunet.doc. And we had 8 character names, and and the subject of the memo was Cornell is wired in all caps, like the new magazine, Wired magazine. I send it to Bill. Bill's like, you need to send this to Brad Smith, to Brad Silverberg, Brad SI. And I send it to Brad, and Brad's like, you need to send this to John Ludwig. So I send it to John, send it to Brad. John says, you need to send this to Jay Allard. So I send it to Jay Allard. And Jay's like, oh, you got to read this. And he sends me back a memo. And his memo is the embrace and extend memo about the internet. And it's called Writing the Next Platform, right? Is that the name of it? Windows, the next killer app for the internet. And it's about Windows and the role of the internet. And Jay, turns out, I go, as soon as I get back, beeline for Jay's office, go into Jay's office, which is building 2 where the NT networking team was. I walk into Jay's office. First thing I notice, he's wearing Puma Clydes, same as me. So we are bonding immediately. He tells me his story about working at Boston University on the internet. And Jay and I are talking, and I'm like, okay, we're going to have to do something big here.
Jay Allard was a self-proclaimed internet nerd who had worked on the internet when he was still attending Boston University. When he was hired, he talked to recruiters about the internet, and he was only 22 years old when he dashed off his Windows, the next killer app for the internet memo to the company's leadership.
Well, but you were in the enterprise world, right? I'm just a kid in college, and so never heard of it, and I couldn't find anybody that ever had. And so I said, sure, I'll do that. And, Rich, those interviews were even more compelling. Every single person I talked to in those interviews effectively said, look, kid, you got the job. Here's the job description. And they'd hand me a blank sheet of paper and say, like, what is your view of what we need to do? And I was just amazed. I didn't expect that in those 5 conversations. Research was different. When I was talking to folks in research, it was definitely more like, prove it, kid. And these were much more like, hey, we're open ears. And I said, well, we got to get my mom on the internet. I mean, this internet thing, like this computer on every desk and every home, it's a foregone conclusion. That's an inevitability. That's not a vision. It might have been a vision to get you that far, but we got to connect them all together. And, they studiously took notes and then handed me business cards with their CompuServe email addresses on them. And I got the offer. And so I joined the LAN manager group back in the day when Brian Valentine was running it. Oh, well, I told everybody that would listen, and there weren't that many people that would listen, that, the internet was going to be the big thing. And yeah, I just didn't feel like enough people were listening. So I wrote a memo, and I was just angry. I wrote it on my SunSpark station, right? And formatted it nicely, but there was no Windows, there was no Word, there was no email. I was still on Whizmail. And so I wrote this thing, and I don't know, it was probably a dozen pages. And I was like, we're missing it, guys. Like the killer app for Windows is the internet. Like, that is the game changer.
That's true.
It's not this little thing that we're working on, this little thing. There's a lot of strategery going on. And I'm like, when all these things get connected, like, it will be a rift in the computing mindset and the way that people interface with computers like we've never envisioned before. We gotta. And we were off doing proprietary MSN based on proprietary protocols, proprietary layout. And I'm like, guys, no. And, the web was just starting. Like, the first Mosaic browser had just come out. And that was the tipping point for me. We weren't one of the top priorities, you know?
Right.
Woe is me. But then you saw all of that movement. And we had talked about platforms since the day I joined the company. We talked about platforms and evangelism, and APIs, and, supporting software developers and scale and growth and all these things and platform. But it wasn't until this internet thing happened and was 100x bigger than the 1000x that I thought it was, that I realized the power of the platform. And the power of the platform is when you create more value than you capture.
Right.
And it was just the 7 of us. And we created that value for others in the company to go do this stuff. And then everybody built on top of that. And wow, I just got addicted. I was so addicted to that idea, and it finally resonated. It was, Paul Moritz or, Steve Ballmer or Bill Gates, platform. We'd say it. And it took 10 years for me to get it through my head. And so, the reason I joined Microsoft was scale and impact, like I said. And the goal was to get my mom on the internet, who was a technophobe. And I was like, if she could just, stay connected with her extended family and swap recipes. Next thing you know, my inbox is filled with cat gifts from my mom. And I'm like, damn it, she's on the internet. Like, I'm done. Like, what else is there to do? I read that sad memo that I wrote, and it's like, all of that was achieved and then some.
Sinofsky had found a kindred spirit, and when he finally made it back to Redmond, out of that snowstorm, he beelined it for Allard's office. Here's how Sinofsky recalls what happened when they put their heads together.
Go back to my office, and I just tell Bill, I'm setting up an internet in my office. We're going to have an offsite. Bill does the thing where he draws a calendar on his legal pad, turns it sideways, and he's like, okay, how about April 5th? I'm like, okay. Book the offsite. They all knew the internet, but nobody knew that it was about to be this giant tsunami. So we had the offsite, and I got to say, it was only like 4 weeks from the time I finally got back, talked with Jay, and had the offsite. It was absolutely crystal clear that the internet was going to be big. All of this became clear in April of 1994. And by the way, the offsite was held the day after Netscape was incorporated. It's poetic. I had put together a briefing book to teach the internet to people. It was this thing. I had to go over to MS Copy and hand carrying them back because the shuttle drivers didn't want to carry it. It was so big. And it was testimony. And so to just how fast we could move. And then we had the offsite. I wrote up the notes, and I was obnoxious about it with Bill. I said, look, Bill, this is what we're telling everybody. And I'm not trying to take credit. It was obvious. I was just doing the legwork, the legwork. I said, nobody should be asking questions about the internet and researching it and deciding if it's going to be a big deal or not. Our bet is on the internet. So that went out. And then we just had a sprint to get to August of 1995 and get all the stuff done that we did. And everybody has their own stories. Ben can tell you all about the browser. Jay can tell you about TCP/IP and networking. Brad Chase can tell you about distributing the browser. Russ Siegelman can tell you about the MSN network and creating it. I mean, everybody was just the Word team. The Word team had already, Peter Pathé, his email was blue. Peter, that was his nickname from college. Peter, who had done the TrueType team, was general manager of Word, and he was already doing HTML when I found him. And they had already licensed code so they could because it turns out everybody was asking the Word team how to convert it. I went down and visited the PowerPoint team, and they showed me how to convert PowerPoint decks to HTML because everybody was trying to do that. And we actually talked all about it. There was a Pizza Hut right next to the PowerPoint office down in Silicon Valley. And they were like, shh, don't let anybody hear you. And you could hear people talking about, I could hear people talking about the internet, people from Sun, from Apple, from Oracle. And so that got us just to April. Then the company was just working. Steve had come to my office, got the demo, would send everyone from the field. There was a guy in the field, for example, who every month would put together all the white papers and sales materials and PowerPoint decks that the field needed, get them translated and put them on CD-ROMs and DHL them to, Lagos and Cape Town and Bolivia and all around the world every month. And I'm like, why don't you just set up a website? And you learn, well, they don't have the internet in La Paz right now. or they do, and it's 300 baud, and we did all this corporate stuff. I talked to Lori Moore in support and Patty Stonesifer about making all of the product support stuff like email and online and chat. Everybody was doing it instantly. There was no mandate. There was nothing. And so we did all that, and Bill just had to write a memo to cap that. So that became the tidal wave memo. But it was like a year and a half later from all of the work that all of these people did.
That offsite, held the day after Netscape was incorporated, marked a turning point. It was clear Microsoft had to bet big on the internet.
Next, we hear from John Ludwig, who describes how different teams across Microsoft, like a fleet of speedboats, began independently turning toward the internet.
From building the first consumer browser to integrating TCP/IP into Windows, John and his team were among the first to act. And when Bill Gates issued the now famous Internet Tidal Wave memo, it galvanized the entire company.
When I joined Microsoft, I joined that network business unit for the first job. And I joined that because this notion of connecting people, letting me share things with people and talk to people and interact with people, that seemed to me to be a big part of what this wave of computers was about. It was great if you could do stuff by yourself, but oh my gosh, if you could connect with other people, it was just so much better. And I think even during the release of Windows 95, when we were all using CompuServe to connect to beta customers and talk to them, you could start to find communities online and connect to kindred spirits online and create friendships online with people that you never would have come into contact otherwise. And that to me is very empowering, that ability to, find your peeps online and build those connections. And I just thought that was great. And so during the development of Windows 95, the internet really started to take off. I think Mosaic was incorporated and launched their first browser. And we were still in the midst of trying to get Windows 95 done, but we saw this coming. And we realized at that point, historically in the past, when we shipped a product, we were all able to sit back and relax and take some time to get yourself recentered and start on the next thing. But late in the project Windows 95, we realized, oh God, we got a big thing we got to go work on, because this is just moving faster than we realized. And so it was, even before Windows 95 was done, we started our browser team, and we started adding the IP stack to Windows, and we started planning for all that internet support to make all that happen. And it was hard because we didn't get some of that downtime we thought we were going to have, but it was exciting because it was a great wave of connectivity and cool new things happening that we wanted to be a part of. A great thing about Microsoft back in those days is we did have a lot of autonomy. Someone once described the company as, it wasn't a battleship, it was a fleet of little speedboats. And, a couple people would see that there was a new thing happening and they'd turn their speedboat that way. And then a few more would turn. Then all of a sudden, 500 speedboats were heading that way. And eventually the company would make it a formal plan. And so we were in that stage in early 95 of the speedboats starting to turn. And there were people in the Windows group, the Windows 95 group, that were realizing, oh my gosh, we need to have a browser. We need to be able to view this internet thing. We need to get that done. And so a small number of us started to chase that, and Brad Silverberg was very supportive. And it's not like we were doing this in secret. I mean, Paul Moritz knew, I think Steve and Bill knew, but it wasn't a big thing yet. But we were spending some time on it. And I think in the Windows NT group, they knew they had to get stuff done, and they were working on the server side. I think in the apps groups, I know the Word group in particular, they were building browsing support and authoring support into Word. And so there were lots of things going on and people talking about it and sharing and demoing stuff. And so there's a lot of organic movement. It was a bunch of those speedboats all starting to turn. And, that was in probably early 95 when the speedboats were all starting to head that way. And, by mid 95, there were so many people starting to think that way that, it was okay. We need to actually start to corral all this and figure out what the heck we're doing as a company.
Got it. Okay, so what was the Internet Tidal Wave memo?
I knew it came out in 95 sometime. I'm thinking like April maybe. I don't know when it came out, but I think at that point there were a lot of people starting to realize we need to work on this internet thing, and I'm sure Bill was reading all about it. And was collecting stuff, and so he, I think, formulated a lot of his ideas and pulled them together. And there were a lot of memos and stuff going around about then. But I think that was maybe when the company all started to realize, oh, this is a thing that we all need to be working on. And it was really great because by mid to late 95, it was so easy to get everybody to work on the right stuff because everybody's mind was now starting to think about this internet stuff. And so we, people from all across the company pitched in and worked on things. And it was the company was really good at shifting to that back in those days. My role in that kind of internet shift, we were going to take on the job in the Windows 95 group of building that consumer browser to get on the internet, to compete with Mosaic, and to, make it easy for a Windows customer to leap onto that internet and start to view sites and do things with them. And we started with like 2 people working on it in early 95, and we licensed a code base. And by the end of 95, I don't know, we had like 700 people working on it. And there were a couple reasons why we were able to shift so many people so fast. Number one, going back to that speedboat analogy, everybody read that memo. Everybody saw what was going on. People were motivated to start helping. 2, I think Bill gave out a strong message to the company saying, this is really important and you need to go help on this. And so that was motivating. And then 3 was a gift we got from Mark Andreessen, who came out with this famous quote, and he now denies he said it, but he said it, that they believed that they were going to, render Windows into just being a poorly debugged set of device drivers. Because his view of the world is all the interesting applications are going to be on the internet running through the browser, and the rest of Windows didn't matter. So, you just told, thousands of people here that their job didn't matter, and thousands of smart people that they were, meaningless. And that was very motivating. I mean, if when you needed to get help on some feature on internet work, you could just point to that quote and everybody would be like, yeah, I'm in, I'm helping. So it was pretty easy to get people to move. And, when you look at what we eventually shipped as a browser for Internet Explorer for the Windows platform, we had help from all over the company. The languages team did a great job of doing all the language and scripting support in that. We had the tools team doing debugging. We had the server team doing the back end for it. We had within the Windows team, the kernel team jumped on and did the Java virtual machine. We just had people that came in from everywhere to help make it happen. And it was a really great time to be here. The amount of organic teamwork that happened, it was exciting and empowering, and it felt really good. The internet changed the world in a couple of ways. Firstly, that thing I talked about before of, gosh, you could connect online and find your peeps in some community, whether you were a model railroader or really interested in politics or excited about poetry or wanted to do drawing and anime, God, whatever it was. And wherever you were, you could be in some small town where there was no one with your interests anywhere, but you could find these communities online of hundreds of people that were super interested. And I think that ability to connect with people and find your like-minded folks is just a huge thing. It's still powerful to this day. I mean, whatever site you're using, there's just such great ability to connect with people. And then the other big thing was, it used to be to get a new software experience on your machine, you had to go get an installer and install software, and it was a pain in the butt and it was finicky. And then if you change machines, you need to do it again. And, installing and delivering a new software experience was hard, and it was a real impediment to adoption. And now all of a sudden I just go to a site and boom, there's the experience. And I don't need to go install things. I don't need a disk. Just sign up at the site, and now I'm doing some accounting thing, or I'm doing some design thing, or I'm doing, some travel booking, or all these things that you could just do without having to go off and install software. It just made it so much easier to try a bunch of things. I don't think people today understand what a sea change that was for using computers. And there's some loss there too, because I used to love to go to Egghead Software or go to Computer City and see all the stuff, and it was all the marketing around that, and that was great. I mean, I enjoyed those days, but that's gone now, right? Nobody does that anymore. When we started that effort, we had Mosaic was in the market, Netscape. And we had 0% market share. And in the course of, less than a year, we got to like 30% market share by, climbing our way up out of that hole and building a great product. Internet Explorer 3 was a much better product than the Netscape product that was out there. And it was well designed, well architected, had beautiful interface, had great features, and getting from zero to that, I think was a great accomplishment. And so I'm pretty proud of that. I'm also proud of just the internal work we did, where we went from 2 people working on this to like 700 contributing to that. And, getting that to happen in semi-orderly fashion and not having that blow up was I think a lot of work. And so I'm proud of that as well. The Internet Tidal Wave memo was a memo that Bill brought out sometime in '95 to kind of really communicate to the company the importance of this internet wave. There were a lot of us that were already starting to move that way, and we're already working on various things for the internet. But the memo kind of brought it to the whole company's attention and made it really easy to get everybody working and helping out on the internet transition at that point. We did all have this sense of all working together and pulling on the same oars at the time. And I do have to give big tip of the hat to Bill, to Steve, the executives who gave everybody options packages when they joined. And those option packages really helped to align us all. I remember my first month when I joined the company, 1 month in, the Microsoft Word team announced a slip in their schedule, and the stock dropped a huge amount. And all of a sudden, my options package was underwater for the next year. I was making no money. But it was very motivating, because when the Word team showed up and said, hey, we need some help, we're having trouble printing to network printers, everybody in the network business unit stopped and said, okay, let's help these guys, because it turns out that their success is our success and vice versa. And it's obvious that we should help them because they have a massive impact on, our own personal success. And I think we all shared in the same success. And I think the dominant part of our personal compensation was how the overall company did. And so it was easy to get people aligned on let's make our apps all great, or let's make this transition to Windows 95 really great, or let's all get this internet thing going well, because we all shared in that success. And I'll contrast, I saw some companies later in my career, I ended up through acquisition in one where employees didn't have stock options. And the primary way you got better compensation was to climb the ladder and grab a bigger salary for yourself. And boy, that creates terrible behavior internally because it pits people against each other and it feels like a zero-sum game. And people aren't all playing the same wars. People are basically trying to build their own little empires, and you really didn't have that at Microsoft at the time. We were all felt like we're on the same team, and communications were super open, right? If you had a problem and you needed to talk to somebody, across campus in the applications group or something, you just walked over there and talked to them. If you needed to talk to Mike Maples who ran the group, you walked over and talked to Mike. If you needed to talk to Bill, you walked over and talked to Bill. You might have to wait a little bit, but it was really open and, an emphasis on doing the right thing for the company. And I think that is easier to achieve when the company is a certain size. As it gets larger and larger and larger, that's inevitably really hard to do. So it was just a great time to be at the company.
John also reflected on how the internet changed everything, from how people connected with communities to how software was being delivered. No more lining up at Egghead Software, just click and go. We turn to Mike Toutonghi, who helped lead the creation of the .NET platform, a modern development environment built for the internet age.
Mike shares how .NET emerged from the need for a secure, scalable, and language-agnostic platform, one that could support everything from enterprise servers to small devices.
We needed a new platform that was made for the internet because it had security built in. The turning point for the .NET platform group was an event that we called BOLT, Beachside Offsite on Lightning Technology, which we held as an open company event. And we invited groups from all around the company to really try and understand what it was we were building. We presented all these different things, hopefully answered a bunch of questions. And that was probably 2 years into the project. And that's when we went from really being not well understood and not really supported and kind of like people didn't like what we were doing because it was a threat to, we should all be like thinking about this as a future thing. It basically gave Microsoft a modern development platform. So really what .NET did is it created this consistent platform from the biggest servers to the smallest devices as a thing that you could target. Now it's in Azure and it's, kind of across all of Microsoft's products and platforms. And it really just had more to do with security, more modern execution environments and operating systems, and a easier to use, more consistent, more modern development platform, which was really important at the time.
His story is a reminder that embracing the internet wasn't just about browsers. It was about rethinking the entire software stack.
While engineers were building the infrastructure, Patty Stonesifer was helping reimagine what the internet could do for people, especially in media and creativity and knowledge.
As head of the interactive media division, Patty helped launch groundbreaking projects like Slate and Expedia, asking bold questions. How will travel change? How will political commentary evolve?
The internet went from being mostly a walled garden with AOL and even early efforts at Microsoft to this wide open idea where things were just moving so rapidly that need to be inventors and to ask constantly, how will travel change? Thus, Expedia, how will access to news change? How will political commentary change? The creation of Slate here, which was a huge change for me personally, as well as for the world of political dialogue. Those kinds of things were just wide open. And we were out looking and talking to creative people around the country and around the world about what kind of information, what kind of products would they see in the future that would empower people, engage people, delight people, based on this idea of a computer on every desk and in every home. Well, I think the idea of the personal computer as a creativity tool was probably the most important thing that came out of the interactive media division, as a knowledge tool, not just a corporate productivity tool, but as this broader creative and knowledge tool, and the constant need to be examining what kind of knowledge are we facilitating, that knowledge, what kind of creativity are our tools as well as our products facilitating that creativity, was a very big contribution made by the interactive media division.
Her work helped redefine the PC, not just as a business tool, but as a platform for expression, exploration, and engagement. And you know something about engagement when it comes to this. You were there at the start of MSN Music.
I absolutely was. I actually was even before that. I was part of MSN. I was hired as a contractor to launch part of the forums. MSN was integrated within Windows 95, kind of like, Microsoft's answer to AOL in the day. And I was responsible for running a few of their communities and forums. So I remember that very first time we got online and we started posting, and it was part of Windows 95, and you could feel the change, Becky. We were right there at the beginning, and we were just cracking open the door, and the brightness of the internet was coming through. It was blinding.
What were you guys thinking at that time? Because the rest of us who were outside the company, who weren't in the trenches of technology, didn't know what was coming. What were you imagining? What were you thinking?
It's kind of hard to describe, but we were learning along the way. I'll never forget this one story, and I don't think I've really told this publicly before, but we were learning how to code web pages. And one of the big aha moments was, you don't want the web page to go horizontal. You want it to go vertical. So that was like, oh, wow, we can't build it this way. So once we turned things around and started going vertically, it just, everything opened up. And I taught myself HTML, because that's every single page back then was just raw HTML. There was no fancy web page or JavaScript or any of that at that point. So we were building it, and then we were also managing it. And what was really interesting from the management side was just the engagement we got and people coming in. You have to remember, there was no broadband. There was no always on internet. So people had to make an appointment to go into their TV room or wherever their computer was, click a modem, log on, hope their mom or their spouse wouldn't pick up the phone, and then connect with the community. So it was really great to see the people using the internet that way and coming online and really leaning in and overcoming some of those technical hurdles to connect with other people from around the world.
And I love that word you pulled out, community, because that was really, I feel like, where everybody did start to be able to connect with each other.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really, one of my jobs was creating the early policies around what it means to be on the internet and what it means to be an internet troll and how to deal with them. But more importantly, the excitement of connecting with people, of like-minded folks. Oh, you like this thing? I like this thing too. And just kind of sharing notes. That was tremendously exciting. And having that in MSN and part of Windows 95, which was already a crazy, incredibly successful launch that changed the company in so many ways. Being part of that is really a defining moment for me in my career.
Wow. Fantastic. Now, I know bringing music to a streaming situation, that is, we could do a whole podcast just on that, but maybe let's talk just briefly. What was that like? Because I still remember putting the 33s and the on a turntable and moving the arm over, and I remember cassettes and but when you could first just get music anywhere.
Yeah, that's when I was hired at Microsoft full time in 2001. my job as the editor-in-chief of MSN Music. MSN Music was one of the original music streamers. People forget this was before iTunes. This was, I believe, right before Pandora and a few others. So I had a team of people that would go in, rip CDs, which is what we called it back in the day, classify it against a series of categories so that we could have this concept where we would sounds like. So you say, oh, I like this music. Show me more music that sounds like. And that was all manual in the back. It wasn't digital. It wasn't fingerprinting. It really wasn't any of that. It was all manual, but it was the first time we were streaming music to people in their browsers, on their laptops. The concept of a always on mobile phone was still years away. So I was just excited to be ahead of the curve at that point, because I knew, coming from music in the 90s, which was all broadcast, that this was the future. Streaming music was the future.
And that's what we're still doing today. Like, yeah, it's so fantastic. Well, as we reflect on these stories, one thing becomes really clear. The internet connected the world, but Microsoft really gave people the tools to use that connectivity.
Yeah, I mean, from integrating internet capabilities into Windows to launching IE, Internet Explorer, MSN Messenger, building MSN, Microsoft helped millions of people and businesses get online and connect for the first time.
Absolutely. And it didn't stop there, with the rise of cloud computing, and Microsoft introduced Azure, enabling scalable web services and powering the digital backbone of modern enterprises.
Of course, today, teams like Microsoft Teams and OneDrive, they've really redefined how we collaborate and share online, especially in this remote first world where we can do our jobs, or many jobs, sitting at home, on your computer. So, and through its work on security and standards, Microsoft has helped make the internet safer and more reliable for everyone. Together, Microsoft and the internet democratized technology, accelerated globalization, and reshaped modern life, from how we work, how we learn, and how we get entertained, and how we connect and create.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast app. Make sure you leave a rating and review, and share it with someone you know. We hope you join us again for the next episode of Beyond the Blue Badge.